Well, Soma, it is so good to be back with you guys on a Tuesday night. I hope you are doing well. We miss you guys, and we wish we were together in person. I miss our Tuesday night hangouts, the games, the team, all of us coming together, worshiping, life groups, giving sweet snacks to all you guys. So I hope you guys are staying safe and doing well. It's crazy to think that the month of January is almost over. It's almost complete and finished. This year is already moving quickly. And so we hope that you are doing well, and we wait with anticipation for the next announcement and hoping that we can gather together once again. Well, we are continuing our series on spiritual discipline, so I hope that you guys have learned some stuff, taken some stuff to heart, whether it's about prayer or whether it is about fellowship, things that we've talked about so far. Tonight I'm going to be talking about stewardship, the discipline of stewardship. So I hope you guys are ready. I hope you guys jump in, and I hope that you learn something, because I think the discipline of stewardship is just as important as the discipline of prayer and the discipline of fellowship, where it just makes us more of a complete human. It makes us better. It makes us better. It makes us closer to God and our priorities, our heart, our mind, and everything that we do together. And so let's go ahead and dive in. Stewardship is the care and management of which belongs to another. Stewardship is the care and the management of something that belongs to another. See, we often speak about things, material things, that actually we use the language like ours. It belongs to us. That's mine. We use possessive language around it. But the reality is that everything that we have, everything that we own, was once given to us. Whether it's time, whether it's what you have, whether it's the computer that you're watching this on, if it is yours, whether it's your cell phone, whether it's the clothes on your back. Everything you have was once given to you. The time that we have today is a gift from God. Everything that we have is given to us. And so from that premise alone, we need to begin to reframe and readjust how we look at the lens in which we see the world. If everything we have is given to us, how do we be good stewards of it, just to manage what we actually have that isn't ours? See, to put it simply, the Apostle Paul wrote this in 1 Corinthians 4:7. What do you have that you did not receive? He's essentially saying, what do you have that you didn't receive? Just what I just said. Everything that we have is given to us. Everything that we have is given to us. Now, it's an important concept to understand that as we begin to move forward. So it's from God that we've received our lives, everything in them, which we're responsible for, temporarily, until God requires it of us. We're stewards of these gifts. We're managing everything that is given to us. So the base thought of stewardship is that everything that we have is not only temporary, but temporarily in our possession. So the idea I want you guys to try to wrap your heads around today is that everything that we have is not only temporary, but it's temporarily given to us, temporarily in our possession. See, I remember when I first moved to California, and I was in Bible college. I had just finished working at Apple Computers. If you didn't know, I used to be an employee of Apple, and I worked at the Apple Store in Ottawa. And so I had a laptop at the time. I got, some of the older people, if you'll remember, they used to have an original black MacBook. So the iconic white MacBook, and then I had the black one just because I thought it was so much cooler. And then just before I left Apple, I decided to buy the MacBook Air. And so getting a new laptop, using my final discount for me to go off to college. So I bought the new MacBook Air, and I had my black MacBook, which still worked fantastic. Like, it was still a really great computer. And so I moved to California with 2 laptops, and I remember being there, and I was like, I don't actually need 2 laptops. Like, who needs 2 laptops? Like, obviously, I'd use the newer one, the better one, but I had this black MacBook. And I remember just being challenged with the thought of generosity, and this thought of, I have 2 computers, and we had some students, or we had a particular student who would have to handwrite all of their notes. They'd handwrite everything because they couldn't afford or they didn't own a computer. And you guys understand you're in school today. The idea of being in school and not having a computer access is like a nightmare. Could you imagine? Like, I don't actually think it'd be possible in the year 2021 to be in school and not have a computer, because with pandemic like last year, you guys had to do everything online. Like, it would be impossible. And so the idea, this student didn't have anything where documents, notes, everything was emailed, everything was online, even then. And so with everything being online, I just remember I had 2 laptops, and if you know anything about Apple products, is they're not cheap. So like, I could have sold this laptop that was 2-3 years old, probably for $800-900 at the time. And yeah, I could have put that money in the pocket, but I just remember being challenged and being in Bible college, and at this time just saying things like, I want to be generous, I want to be radical, I want to do things that are extreme, like I want to live a life that would model this. And so I decided to give that laptop to this student who didn't have it, and it absolutely blew their mind. Like, they'd never experienced generosity like that. And it's not to toot my own horn, but it was just the idea of, I got to play a part in someone's story where it reframed their idea of generosity. Do you not think that would be cool, where you could be so generous to somebody that they would have to reshape the idea of how generous somebody could be in their lives? I mean, I know personally, time and time again in my own life, where people have been beyond generous with me, that it's caused me to reshape my idea of generosity, where it makes no sense that people would be so kind to me, where it's like, wow, like, you're being so generous. And they simply say, no, I'm just trying to be obedient to what I feel God's calling me to do. And it's amazing, the idea of that they're viewing whatever they have in their possession as somebody that is just transitioning it, as someone who is stewarding it to somebody else. And it's amazing, because everything that we have was once given to us, so it shouldn't be that hard to give it away. But it is. Sometimes generosity is very, very difficult, because if you're anything like me, you like stuff. I like stuff. You know what I like better than stuff? New stuff. Like, I'm a stuff kind of guy. And you're probably the same way. Like, my love language isn't gifts, but I love when people give me gifts. Like, who doesn't love gifts? I love giving gifts because gifts are awesome. And it's that idea of that if you like it, somebody else probably would too. And so it's that idea of like, how do we actually learn? And I think the key word in there is learn, because it's not just like, you don't just like someday wake up with it. It's a skill that's learned. Generosity is something that is learned. How do we learn to be good stewards of what's actually in our hand? I've heard many pastors say this, and it's, I'll coin the phrase as well. It's not about what God can get to you, but it's what God can get through you. Because ultimately, God is just moving his pieces, his things all across to be generous, because he's a loving father. He's a kind father. And so generosity is so important. But see, we often associate stewardship with money. But stewardship is something that can also be applied to time, talent, and treasure. So it's not just money when it comes to stewardship, but there's multiple layers of things that we can steward, because time is a gift, our talents are a gift, and the treasures that we have are a gift. So we can be stewards across many things. But stewardship isn't just being a good manager of our schedules, our skills, and our stuff. That's not where stewardship ends. Stewardship is not just about being a good manager of our schedules, skills, and stuff. You guys hearing me on that? The discipline of biblical stewardship calls us to use these things the way the Lord actually wants us to employ them for ultimately his glory. However, understanding stewardship starts with understanding the gospel. So if we're going to begin to understand this idea of stewardship, of how do we be good stewards of what we have, it's beginning with understanding the gospel. It's understanding the story of what God accomplished through the life and death of Jesus. And I think a really great example of this is found in Luke chapter 19. It's probably a story that many of you are familiar with. It's the story of Zacchaeus. You know, Zacchaeus was a wee little man, and a wee little man was he. Zacchaeus was a wee little man, and he climbed a sycamore tree. You probably may have heard that story before, but if you don't, Zacchaeus was a tax collector, and he unfairly and wrongly taxed his people. And to the point that it was so unfair and so wrong, he was stealing from them. And then all of a sudden he meets Jesus in Luke chapter 19, and he goes through this incredible transformation in his heart where something just clicks in his mind, and he sees this transformation, and he says something along these lines. "Behold, Lord," speaking to Jesus, "half of my possessions I will give back to the poor, and anyone, if I've defrauded them of anything, I will give back 4 times as much." Today's then, the gospel of Jesus turns our hearts and our priorities back towards the mission of the gospel. See, Zacchaeus heard the good news of the gospel, and the byproduct of hearing that was a transformation of everything else in his life. The byproduct of hearing the good news of what Jesus did was the transformation of everything else that he had in his control. Immediately, it wasn't just like, how do I get more, but it was how do I give more? It just flipped the script 180, because that's what the kingdom of God is. It is this backwards economy where it says, lay your life down and you will find it. Give and you shall receive. And it's just this backwards idea that once he heard this kingdom gospel, once he heard this missional mindset, that just everything else in his life was transformed. That's why when we look at the evidence of, a transformed life, when we look at the idea of someone's lives being transformed, when a person is, the easiest way to tell that if Jesus is affecting somebody's life or is transforming somebody's life, is the way that they use their time, the way that they use their talents, the way that they use their treasures, because it's then to further the gospel. It's to show the love of Christ to other people. It's the power of a transformed life. It's the one that testifies to the value one places on the gospel. That they treasure the gospel above everything else. There's so many times in my life where I've gotten this wrong, and this isn't the idea of, if you're saved, you have to get rid of everything. You just have to go and sell it all. It's understanding I had a second MacBook, which enabled me to give away the other MacBook. It's the blessing of abundance. I had 2 MacBooks, which allowed me to give away one of them. So it wasn't just that idea of I had to give everything that I had. Zacchaeus said he gave away half his possession. Who knows, half of $100 is more than $25. So it's that idea of when God's calling us to give things away, more often than not, it's probably not going to be calling us to just be absolutely broke. That's not the call of stewardship here. But it's the idea of everything that we have, that if God calls us to that, we're going to be willing and able to give away. See, God's never called me to give away anything that I didn't own. That's the crazy thing, is God has never called me to give away something or to do something that I didn't own or I didn't have. I've never been called to give away a Lamborghini. I would love to be called to give away a Lamborghini, because that means I would own a Lamborghini. Maybe someday. I'm more of an Aston Martin guy. Those are really fancy cars if you're not following. But it's these sort of ideas that God's not going to call you to give something that you don't actually have. But if you do have it, the question is, when we search our hearts and our minds, are we willing to give that away? And this is something that I struggle with, because, the more I grow in the Lord, the more I grow older, and the more financial risks I take on. I don't own a house, but I own a car. And it's that idea of I've known people that have given away cars, and it's crazy. And I aspire to that idea of generosity, but it's the deeper levels of generosity can be scary, but I think they can also be exciting. And the question is, are we living our lives that we're going to be generous and good stewards of what we have in front of us? So the question is, what do we have now? Soma, what do you have now? What do we feel called to steward? Well, simply, I hope that answer is everything. And this isn't to say give everything away, but what do we have that we can steward? And how do we prioritize generosity and stewardship in our lives? How do we prioritize stewardship in our lives? Do we look at everything that we have and say, this is an opportunity to be generous with our skills, our stuff, our schedules? Can we be generous with our schedules towards the disenfranchised and the hurt? Maybe there's people in your school that would value or find value in your time. If your high school is anything like my high school, you have a certain people group that, are often rejected, often outcast, bullied often. Would those people benefit from our schedules and being invited in to spend time with us? Because everyone's looking to be loved and accepted. And, maybe you don't have a lot of money, but maybe you have some. How can we be generous towards our family member, our parents? I think it'd be a humbling thing if, as students, we were to go and give our parents money and say, hey, I don't have much, but I want to bless you and dad or mom and dad on a date night. Here's $20, go get Starbucks on us. What a crazy thing it would be, where it doesn't have to be extraordinary acts of giving away computers and cars, but it could be simply giving people time in their schedule, saying, hey, I prioritize this for you. This is a good thing. How do we be generous and stewards to further the gospel? How do we do that? And so that's what we're going to talk about in life groups tonight. I apologize for last week if you didn't get the life group codes. They're going to be in the chat right now. There's going to be lots of time, so go ahead and jump in to a life group. Senior high girls, you guys are in for a treat. You're going to be with Jaylyn tonight, which is super exciting. So I'm excited for you. Jaylyn is amazing. So senior high girls, go ahead and jump in. Junior high girls, as always, you are going to be with the most amazing wife in the world. Her name is Quinn. She's my wife. And so you guys are going to be with Quinn. And guys, you're going to be all together. So jump in, have fun. Wish Joel McLean a happy birthday. Joel, we love you so much. Happy birthday. You are amazing, Joel. We're wishing you all the best. And I'll be sending you a Starbucks card. But Soma, we love you, and we hope you guys are doing well. We'll see you next week.